There is a bar of soap in your bathroom right now. You don't think about it. You probably never have. But for most of human history, soap was either too dangerous to make, too expensive to buy, or too terrifying to use. And the people who tried to force others to wash with it were accused of spreading disease, laughed at, ignored, and in some cases, destroyed. This is the story of the one invention that almost nobody wanted, and how the decision to tax it kept millions of people filthy for over 100 years. Right now, you wash your hands without thinking. You shower, you use soap, and you trust that it is keeping you clean. But go back just a few centuries, and that trust didn't exist. Because for most of history, soap wasn't a daily habit. It wasn't even a common one. It was rare, expensive, dangerous to produce, and in some periods, actively discouraged. The idea that washing your body with soap could keep you healthy was not obvious. It was not accepted, and for a very long time, it was not believed at all. Soap is ancient. Recipes for it appear in Babylonian clay tablets dating back nearly 5,000 years. The Romans made it. The Gauls used a version of it made from goat fat and ash to make their hair shine. Arab chemists refined it into something close to what we'd recognize today, adding fragrance, improving the formula, producing bars of hard soap that could be traded across continents. By the 12th century, cities like Aleppo and Marseille were famous for their soap. It existed, people knew how to make it, and yet, for centuries, most of Europe didn't use it to wash their bodies. Not because they were ignorant, but because they were afraid. To understand why, you have to understand what people believed about the human body. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, the dominant medical theory held that the skin was a barrier, a protective layer, and that barrier could be breached. Warm water opened the pores, and open pores were a doorway for disease, for infection, for the invisible forces that caused illness. Doctors warned patients not to bathe, not to submerge themselves in water, not to let warmth soften the skin, because once those pores were open, whatever was in the water could get inside you. And in an era when rivers served as sewers, when water sources were visibly contaminated, when diseases like plague and cholera swept through populations, that belief wasn't entirely wrong. The water really was dangerous. The doctors just had the mechanism backwards. So instead of washing, people masked. Perfume was not a luxury. It was a medical tool. The wealthy soaked their clothes in scent. They carried pomanders, small containers packed with aromatic herbs and spices, pressed to their noses when they moved through crowds. They changed their linen frequently, believing clean white cloth could absorb and remove impurities from the skin without the danger of water. The philosophy was simple. You didn't need water to be clean. You needed dry cloth and smell. If you smelled right, you were safe. And at the very top of European society, this philosophy reached its most extreme expression. King Louis XIV of France, the most powerful monarch in the world, the Sun King, the man who built Versailles. His doctors prescribed bathing only as a medical treatment, not as a routine. His washing consisted of rubbing his face with cotton soaked in diluted scented alcohol and dipping his fingertips in a bowl. Water on the skin was considered dangerous to his health. He was usually powdered from head to toe with perfume powder several times a day. He changed his shirt multiple times daily, believing the linen was doing the cleaning. And when his doctor finally ordered him to take a full bath for medical reasons, Louis tried to get out of it by pretending to have a terrible headache as soon as he was immersed in water. This was not a peasant. This was the most sophisticated court in the world, and they were terrified of soap and water. But here's where the story becomes something else entirely, because even as attitudes slowly began to shift, Even as some physicians started to question whether water was truly the enemy, a government stepped in and made sure that most people couldn't wash, even if they wanted to. In 1712, the British government introduced a tax on soap. The price of even the most basic soap tripled overnight. For the wealthy, it was an inconvenience. For the poor, it was a wall. It wasn't until the mid-1800s that the poor and working classes could afford to use soap. The tax didn't just make soap expensive, it made the entire industry almost impossible to operate. Manufacturing equipment had to be locked away when not in use, and those boiling soap had to produce a minimum of 1 imperial ton every time they boiled. Small soap makers were driven out of business. Large ones left the country entirely. Many of them immigrated to Ireland, where soap was exempt from tax. And soap smuggling became a genuine criminal trade. People were risking prosecution to get clean. The tax lasted for 141 years. Think about that. From 1712 to 1853, the soap tax raised the equivalent of £8 billion in today's money. £8 billion, built on the backs of people who could not afford to wash their hands. Meanwhile, cholera outbreaks were moving through cities. Typhoid was endemic in poor urban districts. Dysentery killed children routinely. And the one thing that could have slowed the spread of all of it was locked behind a tax that only the wealthy could pay. The government wasn't ignorant of the connection. They simply decided the revenue mattered more. And then there was the science. Because even as the soap tax kept the poor from washing, there was a man trying to prove that hand washing could save lives. His name was Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian physician working in Vienna in the 1840s. And what he discovered should have changed medicine overnight. In the maternity wards of Vienna General Hospital, women were dying at a terrifying rate, not from childbirth itself, from a condition called childbed fever. In some weeks, the mortality rate in certain wards reached 10%, sometimes higher. Women who gave birth on the street and then came to the hospital afterwards had better survival rates than those who had delivered inside. Semmelweis noticed something else. The ward with the highest death rate was the one where medical students worked, students who came directly from performing autopsies on corpses to delivering babies, without washing their hands, without cleaning their instruments, without doing anything between the two. Semmelweis had an idea. He instructed staff to wash their hands with a chlorinated lime solution before entering the maternity ward. The results were immediate, dramatic. In the months after hand washing was introduced, the death rate in his ward dropped from around 10% to under 2%. He had the data. He had the evidence. He had shown that clean hands saved lives. The medical establishment rejected him completely. His findings were dismissed. His theory was ridiculed. The idea that doctors' hands could be carrying something that killed patients was considered offensive, an insult to the profession. Senior physicians refused to accept that they had been causing deaths. Semmelweis was increasingly sidelined. His mental health deteriorated under the weight of the rejection. He was eventually committed to a mental institution where he died in 1865. Ironically, possibly from the very infection he had spent his career trying to prevent. He never knew he was right. He died before the medical world accepted what he had proved. The shift finally came from a different direction, not from a maternity ward, but from a war. When the American Civil War broke out, Army hospitals were armed with soap. Hand washing with soap reduced fatalities on the battlefield. The connection between cleanliness and survival was becoming too consistent to ignore. At the same time, Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister were establishing the germ theory of disease. The idea that invisible microorganisms, not bad air, not open pores, not divine punishment, caused infection. And that soap, by physically removing those organisms from the skin, was one of the most powerful tools in human health. Everything the doctors had believed for centuries was wrong, and everything they had discouraged was exactly what people needed. In 1853, the British soap tax was finally repealed. That, and the improving attitudes toward personal cleanliness, radically increased the consumption of soap throughout the population. Within a few years, soap making was transformed from a number of small artisan manufactories to a high-volume, fully developed industry. For the first time in history, ordinary people could afford to wash, not as an act of luxury, not as a medical treatment, but as a daily habit, and the diseases that had torn through working-class neighborhoods for generations began to retreat. Not because of a new drug, not because of a new vaccine, but because people could finally clean their hands. Today, you pick up a bar of soap without thinking. It costs almost nothing. It is everywhere: hospitals, schools, homes, public bathrooms. The idea that soap is dangerous seems absurd. The idea that a government taxed it for 141 years seems criminal. The idea that a man proved it, saved lives, and was sent to a mental institution for it seems impossible. And yet, all of it happened within the last few hundred years, in what we think of as the modern world. The bar of soap in your bathroom is not just soap. It is the end of a very long, very dark, and very costly battle. A battle that cost more lives than most people will ever know. Because the most dangerous thing in history was not always a weapon. Sometimes it was the absence of something this simple. And if you want to see what else we take for granted, that used to be deadly. Subscribe, because the next one is going to surprise you.